Joining me now is Congressman Marlin Stutzman. He's on the House Committee for Financial Services as well as the Budget Committee. He's a Republican. Thanks so much, Congressman, for taking the time.
Thank you. Great to be with you today.
So much to go through. I'm going to start on Cuba, if I can. Of course, you have this indictment now, and you have an enormous amount of U.S. military assets in the region now, much like we saw before operations in Venezuela. In your view, should the U.S. use military action to effect regime change in Cuba?
Well, I think, first of all, the indictment was the right step forward. And this, of course, gives the signal to Raul Castro of, what could come. He's already fully aware of what happened to Maduro in Venezuela, and I would think that he would want to try to figure out something rather than going through that experience that Maduro did. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think President Trump has so many different tools and options here available, and of course the Cuban people are so hopeful that something new and some change can happen in Cuba that will benefit the island and, of course, free the people there. And really, Cuba has so much potential with the right type of leadership.
But do you believe that if Raul Castro and others around him don't give in to this pressure, right, don't seek a resolution via negotiation, that the U.S., that the president should order military action to remove them then?
Well, you know what? I think what we saw in Venezuela worked tremendously well. And so if Raul wants to take that chance, I think that Maduro probably had the ability to protect himself even more than what Raul Castro has. So he knows that the pressure is there. He knows that his days are limited, that the best thing for him is to try to negotiate a deal for him that he doesn't have to have the same end that Maduro has had.
Should the president seek congressional approval if he decides to take military action in Cuba?
I think that he has a lot of support here. Of course, Cuba is, right off the coast of this South Florida, in southern Florida. So there's a lot of support for something to happen there. They've been stuck under this terrible regime for years. The economics there are terrible. People are suffering. But I know there's a lot of support for some sort of change. I think there's broad support. President Trump has dictators on the run. And my hope is that Raul Castro makes the wise decision and negotiates some sort of deal, steps out of the way, and lets a new government come into Cuba.
I want to talk about Iran now. You heard CNN's reporting in advance that Iran, according to U.S. assessments, is rebuilding its military capacity faster than expected. And there have been previous assessments that showed that it retained more of its missile capacity, drone capacity, than at least the descriptions you often hear coming from the White House. And I wonder, for your constituents, do you believe that the president exaggerated the success of this war and there's still more work to be done?
We know there's more work to be done. I don't believe this regime should stay in power. I think the IRGC should be removed. If they did have the ability to fight back, I think they already would be. Are they trying to rebuild? Sure, whatever they can. But Operation Epic Fury was so successful in such a short amount of time that the IRGC and the Iranian regime hasn't been fighting back. And also, I think what's happening is the coalition against Iran is building. The China trip that President Trump took was such an important piece to all of this. China, of course, said that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. They have committed to helping with the Strait of Hormuz. The coalition, the international coalition that's coming together to eventually, hopefully, control the strait is good for the world, because we can't just let Iran have that much control over 20% of the oil and gas flow that comes out of the Persian Gulf. So I believe President Trump has been very successful. We knew this would take some time. It wasn't going to be like Venezuela, where we were in and out overnight, and the American people woke up to finding out Maduro had been captured. This is going to take longer. We knew that. But ultimately, I think President Trump, he's going to win this one way or the other.
But if the war is already won, how is it that Iran maintains control over the strait? That's certainly the way the oil markets are reading this, and that's how many of America's Gulf allies are reading this.
Well, ultimately, the Americans, we control the strait by not allowing anybody in or out. We have we have shut down the traffic coming out of the Strait in the Persian Gulf. And every ship is worth about $250 million. So when Iran can't sell their oil and gas, we're squeezing off their cash supply for any of their operations. So while it may hurt here at home for a while, it's going to be beneficial to us in the long run. With Venezuela oil and gas coming online eventually, of course, with Alaska leases that have been let, there's going to be an abundance of gas and oil within the hands of the good guys rather than dictators that are going to use it against us. And I think that, again, China, that trip is going to be a huge piece to all this, because I think China really wants to be a good friend to the United States. And I think it's important for us as well, even though there's a lot of violations that they practice on their own people, we can find a way forward that'll be good for both China and the United States.
You come from a family of farmers, multi-generational. As you know, part of the promise that came out of this Beijing summit is that China is going to buy a lot of U.S. agricultural products, soybeans, et cetera.
Yeah.
But if you go back to the first Trump administration, China made a lot of promises and didn't buy all those soybeans. I wonder, as a farmer and to your fellow farmers, do you buy these commitments?
Well, ultimately, just like with the Iranians or with anybody, any sort of dictatorship, you have to watch the actions. You can't just always accept the words that they say. Actions speak louder than words. And so what President Trump has done is use the financial or the economic might of the United States, the military might when needed, to pressure these countries into behaving what's in best for the best interest of the United States. And so I think that he does have a stronger hand in this case. Talking with some folks that I know close to China and understanding what's going on in China, China's not as strong as what they portray themselves to be. Mm-hmm. And so as that's exploited, I think they're going to come our way more and more, because they don't want the conflict. They want to, of course, have good trade agreements for themselves. But at the end of the day, these trade agreements have to be good for the United States. They have to be good for American farmers. The beef agreement that the president talked about is going to be good for the United States, and keeping those markets open. That way we can feed that corn and the soybeans to meat and beef and poultry products that will ultimately end up in China, hopefully, and that'll increase our supply and our demand here in the United States, and that'll bring prices down for the American producer and consumer as well.
Okay, I want to circle back now to a domestic issue here. This is the so-called anti-weaponization fund. In your view, is that an appropriate use of taxpayer money?
Well, if there is evidence of weaponization against American citizens, I do think that it is appropriate. President Obama had one as well. This is not new. This has been done by other presidents before. I just saw a documentary the other night talking about the anti-Christian bias that was occurring under the Biden administration. Whether they were Catholics, whether they were pro-life, whether they were in the military and had to violate their religious beliefs around the COVID vaccines. There's a lot of damage that was done during that period of time, but there has to be strong evidence that there were damages. Now, I have constituents in my district that are still under investigation from the Biden administration, the Biden era, that it's costing them millions of dollars. It's going to cause them to go bankrupt because of these investigations. They're not even being charged with anything, but these investigations will put people out of business. And so I think this fund is appropriate under the right circumstances. And I know the DOJ will look at each of those cases very carefully, and Congress has to look at those as well to be sure that taxpayer dollars are used correctly.
But that last piece is what is the criticism of many of your fellow Republicans, both in the House and the Senate, is that there is no oversight. Their concern is that the money will be directed towards the president's allies. And you yourself, you've spoken out against, for instance, congressional stock trading because you say trust has been lost in the institution. Isn't this a question about trust here? And doesn't there need to be vigorous oversight to make sure that this is a fair process and not cronyism?
For sure, absolutely. And I think that, that will be the request by those of us in Congress to the Trump administration. We want to be able to see how those funds are used, where they were going. Congress that's our responsibility. And so, this is a new announcement. The DOJ has announced just recently that they have these cases where targeting has occurred, and it has cost Americans millions of dollars in some cases because they had to defend themselves against a very powerful federal government. So I think each case will be handled appropriately. Congress has a responsibility to have oversight over those cases, and we'll continue to ask for that.
Congressman Marlin Stutzman, we appreciate you joining the program.